שלא ייגמר לעולם. החול והים, רשרוש של המים, ברוח השמיים, תפילת האדם. החול והים, רשרוש של המים, ברוח השמיים, תפילת האדם. Oh God, my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. Good afternoon. My name is Cantor Elizabeth Sachs. I'm the senior cantor here at Temple Emmanuel in Denver. We are here this afternoon to remember Bob Mandel. We join our hearts together to give comfort and strength to his family. And we know that mourning is a time filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. And so as we begin our service today, we will be using language and liturgy from our ancient tradition, language that brings us comfort, language that grounds us in the values that Bob valued so dearly and displayed so passionately throughout his lifetime. We will have the privilege of hearing from members of his family who wish to remember his life, to lift up for us the relationships that they had. And we will stand together and cry together and laugh together and hold each other together as we wish him a safe journey into the world to come. I'm going to ask that you check that cell phones have been silenced. If we need to use the restrooms in the course of our service this afternoon, please exit the chapel and go out into the hallway. The restrooms are down the long hallway to your right and to your left. In the event of an emergency, unlikely, but just in case, we ask that you listen to directions both from temple staff and also our security team. And finally, I'm going to ask that we just take a moment of silence to center ourselves as we think about the Bob that we knew, as we think about the spirit that we want to bring into this space today. So take a moment and meditate in silence. The Talmud teaches us that there are 3 crowns: the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. But they emphasized in the Talmud that the crown of a good name exceeds them all. In our book of Ecclesiastes, we read, Tov Shem Mishem and Tov, a good name is to be treasured above precious oil. Wealth, health, and life ultimately pass away, but a good name lives forever. It is in this view that the Talmud teaches, monuments need not be erected for the righteous, their deeds are their memorials. They will be remembered and revered for the kindness they have shown, for the love they have given, for they are shining examples of what it means to be a mensch. For sure, we know that Bob was a mensch. That's how he lived his life. The kindnesses he showed to others, the very small, quiet acts of relationship, they defined who he was, and they help us remember how he would like to be remembered now that he is no longer physically with us. When we lose someone we love, we often turn to the 23rd Psalm. And in this psalm, it paints a picture of a beautiful meadow, a quiet space, a still space where we can reflect on those we love. But this psalm also teaches us, Gam ki elech begeitz al mavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you, God, are with me. And the psalm very pointedly says, even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Because in our tradition, we know that it is essential that we do not sit in the valley alone. That we walk through even our darkest moments, supported by those who love us, supported by those who can comfort us, and with the knowledge that God is here and near to help bring us to the other side. And so as we chant this psalm, we imagine a place where we feel connected, where we feel able to take the words and the lessons and the values that Bob has taught us and bring them inside so that we can live life the way he would have lived and live our lives charged by the values that guided his. Psalm 23. Adonai roi lo echsar bino deshe yarbitzeini al mei menuchot yanaleni nafshi yeshovem yancheni v'maglei tzedek yancheni v'maglei tzedek lemon shemo gam ki elech begeitz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha heima yenachamuni taroch lefanai shulchan neged zorerai dishanta Vashem and Roshi Kosi Revaya ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר. With God as my shepherd, I rest in green pastures. God leads me beside still waters and restores my soul. Therefore, I shall not want. I walk in right paths for the sake of the divine name. And even when I walk in the valley of death's shadow, O God, I shall not fear, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. You have prepared a table before me, even in the presence of my enemies. And you have anointed my head with oil. My cup is overflowing. Surely goodness and mercy will pursue me as long as I live, and I shall dwell in your house, O God, forever. Our Bible teaches l'kol zman ve'et l'kol chafetz tachat hashamayim. There is a time for everything, and a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born, and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for tearing down and a time for healing, a time for destroying and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for silence and a time for speaking. We have honored Bob with our silence, and we have honored Bob with words from our liturgy. And now it is our duty and our privilege to honor Bob with speaking. And so we are going to hear from 4 people who knew him well, from his son Craig, from his friend Steve, from his daughter Becca, and from his grandchildren led by Remy. And so at this time, I'm going to invite Craig to come and join us so that he can share words about his father.
So, anybody that knows me knows that that social anxiety is strong in me. And so this scares the heck out of me. I hope I can say that. But I felt like I owed it. You know, it's the least I could do. So, I'm just going to read this. This is my backup in case I can't finish. We may need a backup for her to read my handwriting.
I got you. I'm
so,
right here.
Thank you. And then another backup, you know. Anyway, so hi, I am Craig, Bob's son, although I tended to call him Dad. I was not going to talk today because I did not know if I could, and I still don't. But instead of worrying about not saying enough, I decided I needed to at least allow myself to say something. So, I'm not sure if my love of basketball is a case of nature or nurture, but I can certainly say that my dad helped nurture it. My earliest memories are of going to old McNichols Arena to watch my Nuggets play. for years, I had a song running in my head that went, hit that shot, go with the Nuggets tonight. And I knew that it was related to the Nuggets, but I just couldn't quite figure it out. But due to the magic of the internet, I found that song a few years ago. I'm not going to play it for you, but it's a song from 1976. I think they only were playing it that year, and they played it in the fourth quarter of every game to sort of hype everybody up. And so I was 5 years old, and I still remember, and that song just stuck with me. But even at 51, the Go With the Nuggets song still brings joy and makes me smile and sort of giggle because it's really pretty ridiculous. The Nuggets ended up being my entire bar mitzvah theme, except for the break dancers. and we could always talk about the Nuggets, Broncos, Avalanche, not so much the Rockies. As I became an adult, our conversations expanded, became more personal, more deep, but they would still always at least come back to some sports. My dad was always there. He was there for every away high school basketball game, and I think home high school basketball game, no matter how far away they were. I have a couple high school friends who were here, and they know that those games were really far away. We knew South Park before the rest of the world knew South Park. He was there driving me all the way up Hampton Avenue to school at Colorado Academy for almost 3 years, every day. He was there driving in front of me when I got hit by a 2-ton truck and was miraculously unhurt. But I can't imagine the horror he must have felt as he just felt that experience go by and looked and saw the car completely gone. A side note, I'm still a little bitter because we were going to a mechanic to check out this like 67 Mustang that we were going to maybe buy. And because this accident happened, for some reason, my parents actually decided that having a seat, like a full shoulder seat belt was important. And the Mustangs couldn't do that. So I didn't get that damn car. It would have changed everything. He's been there for me the past few years as I have struggled with long COVID issues. And I know he was probably frustrated not being able to fix it or do more. I'm a lot like my father, except he had really good penmanship. I did not get that. I used to focus more on the similar struggles that we shared, but more recently I started to focus on more of the positives. I am proud to be like my dad. He was a hard worker, kind, loyal, forgiving, never met a dog he didn't like, and he had a great, dry sense of humor. I'm a 51-year-old man, currently feeling like a 12-year-old, needing his dad. I love you, Dad. Thank you for being you.
Steve.
Boy, Craig, every lunch, 2-3 times a week, believe it or not, half the lunch was Stacy and Craig. He'd have been proud. You don't get to keep those. Can I have the Kleenex, please? There's no way I'll make it through this. You guys ever wanted to be a fly on the wall? Here, two old friends just having a ball. Well, listen in. Hey, Bob, old buddy, old pal. I guess it's time to say goodbye for a while. Let's see what I can remember. We met in 1950. I think it was September. I left the West Side after second grade, so we met in third when we were 8. Holy cow, pal. That means 71 years of laughter and tears. You know, Bob, together we buried our kin, but then again, we brought new ones in. Remember the gang at Palmer Elementary where we met? At 9th and Grape with no regret? That big guy Reno and little Les Levitt? Of course, your best pal, Buddy. In the middle of it. Didn't we look silly marching around Palmer as kids on Easter with our Easter bonnets on our lids? On to Boy Scouts, what fun and all of its challenges, the bear and lion and Webelo's badges. Hey, remember going to Bobby Weber's ranch in Wyoming one summer? I took a box of comic books to read without lights, but instead we burned them to stay warm at night. Or the time we played Cowboys and Indians one day. You got to use your dad's real pistol without any lead, and you hid it afterwards under your bed. Oh, boy, did we get in trouble after your mom called my dad. Buddy reminds me of the time you two were messing around in the kitchen with your mom when he did something wrong. She chased him out of the kitchen and onto the floor. Buddy ran to get out the front door. He forgot the glass screen and soon hit him in the face, shattering glass all over the place. Another event causing childhood trouble. Who can forget the hunting trip with Buddy, Bob, Dad, and Uncle Ben up to Last Chance near Kansas around the bend? Buddy got to use the 410 shotgun with a box of 24 shells. Not a single rabbit in his pot after the first 23 shots. He waited patiently until a rabbit was practically sitting on his clothes. Bud was never a hunter. He missed the rabbit and barely missed his toes. Hey, after Palmer, we went to Hill Junior High to continue our plot. And who can forget the softball game out in the lot? I was a catcher. Odie Brown was on third. The ball was hit by a batter whose name was unheard. Odie ran toward me with untold intent, but Big Steve was not going to relent. The crash could be heard throughout the land, and Odie went to the hospital in a van. Oh, what fun we had in junior high with our friend Bob. What a nice guy. East High was next on our split session due to overcrowding for our lessons. So they built George Washington for us to hobnob, to have more fun, me and Bob. Hey, Bob played golf and lots of tennis on the courts. I learned quickly not to mess with him in those sports. But then again, when you think about it all, he didn't mess with me when it came to football. In 1961, the three of us had to split up when I became a Buff, Bobby Southern Cal, and Buddy went to the state pen. Oh, no, Pennsylvania State. Sorry. We all got together again about 4 years later after we were smart. Bobby went to work for his dad Marvin with ABZ right from the start. He worked for 12 hard years to learn his trade. Then sadly, his pop passed away. Bob was concerned about his future needs. What would he do when his mom sold ABZ? Well, we decided to work together to raise the money. About a year later, President Bob took over the company. He had a great job. He did a great job, and he did very well. But several years later, the construction industry went to hell. He sold it just in time, which was super. And again, we had to meet to discuss his future. He decided he'd like to be a dealer, of cards, that is. And he got a job in Central City. Gee whiz. After his stint as a gambling man said adios when his casino had to close, we sat down again and Bobby said, "What should I do?" I said, "I got an idea. Why don't you come work for your old buddy Shoes?" He came, he learned, he studied, and stayed for 7 years, and then retired to enjoy whatever appears. I took him to Las Vegas for his retirement party. Oh, what fun we had. But something strange happened after that. He kept showing up at work for another 5 years or so. That Bob, what a guy. He was still working 4 weeks ago. One last story that so exemplifies Bob. He had a friend who worshiped his dog. The dog was dying in Oregon. Bob flew up there to be with his friend to help him put his dog down. Bobo, everyone here has great memories of you, and I feel lucky I have some too. I could go on for several more memories we had, but actually, I'm getting kind of sort of sad. Bob, everyone you knew says what a nice guy he was. Well, I guess I'm taking up too much time. I just wanted you to know what was on my mind. Thanks, Bobo, for being such a good friend. And thanks, Sandy, for loving him till the end.
That was very well done. I'm Becca, I'm Bob's stepdaughter. And Bob came into my life when I was 17, and I was not an easy teenager, and I apologized for that later on. But from that moment until now, everything has been kindness. I have no memories of Bob that are not kind and wonderful, and even when he was worried about me, or even when he didn't agree with what I was doing, which was often when I was younger, he said it in a very kind way. He was always very careful and just made sure everything was okay, and I am very, very grateful that I had Bob. I tried to make it home in time to see him, and I live in Hawaii now, but I lived in the house with Mom and Bob for a good chunk of my adult life when I needed family support. Again, nothing but kindness ever. And I have so many funny memories, late night conversations, usually making fun of Mom, but sometimes other topics too, watching him try to negotiate the twins, the grandchildren twins, when they were 2, who loved to tackle him, and he loved to try, but keeping up with twin energy, you could see him in the yard just get bowled over and kind of look at me. I'm like, I'll get him, hold on, go on. He was a wonderful man, and I am very sad I did not get to say goodbye. I am happy that I was able to come home and make it for today and to get to gather with everybody. And processing the last 20 years of memories of a parent, there's just too much. The grandkids and watching all of just everybody run through that house. And, Bob was always this rather quiet presence with a dry sense of humor, watching everything and cracking a side joke here and there that if you were lucky enough to be close enough, you'd get to be a part of. And it was such a blessing. Having him was such a blessing. And on behalf of the kids that volunteered me today, I am so happy that I got to know him, and I miss you, Bob. I love you. I wish I'd gotten home in time to say goodbye, but I did say it in my own way. And I love getting to be here with everybody today, and thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Remy Grimm, and I am Bob's eldest grandchild. My mother, Stacy, who's Bob's eldest child, asked me to read the eulogy she wrote for her dad. So first I'll be reading that, and then I'll share some of my own thoughts as well as some from my brother and my sister. Aristotle said it is the characteristic of the magnanimous man to ask no favor, but to be ready to do kindness to others. My father was mild-mannered, easygoing, and soft-spoken, but he was truly a magnanimous man, generous, compassionate, and kind-hearted. My dad was always there to help, to listen, to support. Food, family, and football, those were some of the most important things to my dad. Never one to miss a game, a family occasion, or a dessert. His favorite was coconut cream pie. He was predictable in a way that was comforting, a steady presence who could always be counted on and who was always there for anyone who needed him. During my childhood, we spent Sundays during football season in the nosebleed section at Mile High Stadium. Undeterred by the cold or snow, we shared a love of football and the Broncos, and I treasured that special dad-daughter time. Since my school was near the lumber yard, we shared daily drives to and from school and work. He was quieter in those days. He didn't always know what to say or what to ask, especially with his teenage daughter, and he didn't always feel comfortable expressing his feelings. But there is a depth of emotion there, and we had an unspoken connection that laid the foundation for me to build trust and security. In my adult years, my dad worked hard to become more open and communicative about the harder topics, and I always looked forward to our get-togethers and connecting with him during our at least weekly calls. For an introvert, my dad always had an uncanny ease in talking with people he didn't know, and by people, I mean everyone. He would strike up a conversation with the waiter, the salesperson, or the guy at the dog park, and he was open and warm with everyone. Incredibly proud of his grandchildren, he would brag about their accomplishments to anyone who would listen. Invariably, he would engage those strangers with his smile and his dry sense of humor, and the next thing you know, they'd be looking at photos on his phone, and he would be equally interested in them as well. My dad was a connector. Relationships were so important to him, and he worked hard to maintain his friendships near and far with friends from childhood, high school, and college. Beyond that, he strived to connect others as well. Always the peacemaker, my dad wanted people to mend fences and build relationships. This story was already mentioned, but it really does exemplify him, so we'll hear it again. A couple months ago, when he was likely already sick, he traveled to Oregon to stay with an old friend from college. His friend, who was in poor health himself, lives alone with his elderly dog, his only companion. That dog was scheduled to have some teeth removed, and my dad, concerned about the impact of the procedure on the dog, and if things were to go wrong on his dear friend, flew out to Oregon and stayed with them for the week through the dog's procedure and recovery. That was the kind of friend he was. My dad instilled in me the values of hard work, loyalty, and always doing the right thing. He was a gentle man with a huge heart. He was trusting and forgiving, almost to a fault, even towards those who perhaps didn't deserve it. But that was just who he was. He was the kindest person I have ever known. And he had a strength of character not easily matched. Simply put, he was the best of us. You may or may not know that my dad was only diagnosed with cancer shortly after New Year's Day. Though it was clear to all of us this was very serious, my dad was starting to come to terms with the fact this would inevitably take his life. We thought he had more time. We all thought he had more time. In true giving fashion, my dad left a lesson for us in his sudden passing. There is no guarantee of more time, so say the things you want to say, have the conversations you want to have, and don't leave anything for another day. I recently heard a quote that said, "Sometimes miracles are just good people with kind hearts." And if that is true, my dad, our grandpa, was truly a miracle. And we are so blessed to have had him in our lives. He will be missed deeply by all who loved him, and I know for sure that my life will not be the same without him. And now I will share some thoughts from my siblings and I, from my brother Jasper. My grandpa was someone who was always easy and fun to be around. All the memories I have of him, I remember having a big smile on my face. He cared about everything I had to say and just had the best heart. I will miss him so much. From my brother Brisson, Grandpa Bob was one of the nicest humans I have ever known. He had such a great personality, a strong and pure heart, and he never had anything but the best intentions for everyone. Some of my greatest memories with Grandpa were playing fetch with Bailey at the park, and it always meant so much to me that he came to all my soccer games whenever I played in the Denver area. He was always there to support me and my family in everything we did, and I'm really going to miss him. From my sister Jaden, who left on Friday to go back to Russia and sadly could not be here today, my grandpa was one of the most kind, loving, and supportive person. Was the most kind and loving and supportive person. No matter what path my brothers and I chose, he always supported us 100%, and he made sure to tell everyone, from his co-workers to waitresses at the restaurant, how extremely proud of us he was. Everywhere I went with him, we would make a new friend. He had the biggest heart, and that's something I'll never forget. His last words to me were, "I love you, and I'm so proud of you." I promise, Grandpa, to carry your support with me always, and to continue to work hard to make you proud. Every time I take the stage, I will be dancing for you, and I love you with all my heart. I'll close with some of my own thoughts about Grandpa. There's something to be said for the fact that when my siblings and I recount our most meaningful memories with him, they're all extremely simple moments. Whether it was playing fetch with his dog Bailey, taking us on adventures to the zoo and aquarium, or making long drives to make sure that he was at all of our soccer games, ballet recitals, skating competitions, even braving the cold and hiking up Copper Mountain to watch my brother's snowboarding competition. He always showed up in support of us no matter what. He radiated such a warm, positive energy that made the simplest moments feel incredibly special. Of course, no person is completely flawless. However, when it came to empathy and kindness, he truly was. There was never a moment where he lacked compassion, and this immense, unwavering compassion and unconditional love for others is something he instilled within all of us, and it is something we will carry forward for the rest of our lives.
Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, our God and God of our ancestors. As we enter into this holy moment, let us all pray that we might serve you, Adonai, with honor, grace, and compassion. Guide us as we partake in this sacred moment in the life of this beautiful family. Help us to extend comfort, courage, and strength to all who mourn, and to know and to help them know that in both joy and sadness, O God, you are with us. And let us say, Amen. The Mishnah teaches us of a conference that happened among all of the trees on the earth. And the trees came together to select a king who would rule over them. They sent a delegation to a shade tree which had no fruit. And this group of trees said, "Why do you make so much noise when the wind blows?" And this one tree replied, "Well, the only way that I will be known by the rest of the world is if I make a lot of noise." Then the group of trees turned to a second tree that had lots and lots of fruit. And they said to this tree, "Fruit tree, why are you so quiet? Why do you not let yourself be known? Even when the wind blows through your branches, you are silent." And the fruit-bearing tree replied, "I do not need to make a lot of noise to call attention to myself. My fruit will testify for me." In this story, our tradition is telling us about two types of people. There are some who feel that they must make a lot of noise in order to make their presence known on this earth. And there is also another type. There are people who are quiet and modest, and yet as full of kindness and love for those around them. And they do not need to clamor for attention. I think we all know and have heard so beautifully that Bob Mandel was such a person. And while he may have been quiet, he was inordinately kind and modest and a person of character who lived a very fruitful life. We have seen evidence of so much of that fruit here today. Children and grandchildren, partners who loved him and cared for him for so many years, and a great community that has come here to gather to remember just how kind and compassionate he was. This story about the trees is just one story in our tradition that prizes quiet compassion and quiet strength and a quiet way to walk through life that nevertheless displays inordinate profundity. We know what we have learned from Bob. It is so clear, all of us who sit here. We know that we will carry his memory with us as we move forward. When the family and I gathered to talk a little bit about his life, so much of which you have heard over these last few minutes, some in absolutely beautiful prose, some in very clever poetry. Let's talk later about how perhaps we can have you participate in many other ceremonies that we have. But the stories that came out emphasized over and over and over again that even though Bob was not the center of attention necessarily in any moment, he was the center of so many people's lives because he paid attention, remembered who you were, remembered what your life was like at this moment, asked the questions, and gently reached out to make sure you felt you were known in his presence. Sometimes we equate quietness with complacency, but it was so clear that in Bob's life, the quietness was compassion. And so as we contemplate how he moved through this world, I spent a little time reflecting on some of the songs of the Traveling Wilburys, because I was informed that this was a favorite musical experience of Bob. And there is a particular song that I'm going to read for you. The musical version was not as appropriate for this moment, but the lyrics, I think, really speak to how Bob walked through the world and tried to make sure that everyone knew that it's all right and it's going to be okay. The compassion. So there's a song called End of the Line. I'm sure some of you know it. But I want to read the choruses for you because I think the choruses really speak to the way that Bob walked through this world. Well, it's all right riding around in the breeze. Well, it's all right if you live the life you please. Well, it's all right doing the best you can. Well, it's all right as long as you lend a hand. Well, it's all right even if they say you're wrong. And well, it's all right. Sometimes you got to be strong. Well, it's all right as long as you got somewhere to lay. Well, it's all right. Every day is Judgment Day. Well, it's all right even when push comes to shove. Well, it's all right if you got someone to love. Well, it's all right. Everything will work out fine. Well, it's all right. We're going to the end of the line. Well, it's all right even if you're old and gray. Well, it's all right. You still got something to say. Well, it's all right. Remember to live and let live. Well, it's all right. The best you can do is forgive. Well, it's all right riding around in the breeze. Well, it's all right if you live the life you please. Well, it's all right even if the sun don't shine. Well, it's all right. We're going to the end of the line. Bob, we thank you for your kindness. We thank you for your strength. We thank you for your compassion. We thank you for the memories, both poignant and sweet and funny and silly. We thank you for pointing us toward a life of meaning. And with all of that in our hearts, we rise as we are able for our memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Mamromim, Amsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, Im Kedoshim Udorim, Kezohar Arakia Mazhirim, at Nishmat, at Nishmat, Yakireinu Shalach Leolamo, Bo Harachamim, Yastireu Bezeder Kenafav Leolamim, Veitzror Beitzror HaChaim et Nishmato Adonai Unachalato Ve'anuach B'shalom Al Mishkavo Ve'nomar Amen. May the source of life, the fountain of all being, open our hearts to compassion and our eyes to wisdom, that we might glimpse in perfect peace and sadness the way of all things. May our beloved Bob's memory be for us a blessing, and may we never let the light of his love grow dim in our hearts. May we remember all his worthy and righteous deeds, that his memory be forever bound up in the bond of life. God is our source and our destination, our beginning and our end. And may Bob's death remind us of this truth, that the bond of love we shared and still share will never be severed in sorrow. May he rest in peace, and together we say, Amen. The family would like me to share with you that they will be sitting Shiva at Sandy's house today from the conclusion of this service until 7 p.m. You are invited to come and be with them and share this time with them. We say Zichronei Livracha. May Bob's memory forever be a blessing. And let us all say, Amen. This concludes our service.